The magic of conifers. Well, that seems like a contradiction in terms, perhaps to some, but the next few minutes I think we're going to show some really fantastic changes there have been in introduction in conifers, and none perhaps more striking than this. This is called Picea Daisies White, JW Daisies White, and it transforms from green in the winter time to this wonderful sort of creamy new shoots which cover the whole bush and make such a striking example which you can see from all over the garden. Well, researching for my latest book on conifers, I really thought I'd got enough at Foggy Bottom, but I couldn't resist getting a few new ones, which, as you can see, really are quite bright in the spring with the new growth on. This is actually a much smaller Daisies White that we just looked at. This is only about 4 or 5 years old, and the other ones here, different spruce, and also pines and that sort of thing, and a juniper up there, but also showing that sort of new growth that sort of brings you forward into the spring and the early part of the summer. This is an exciting time, and they won't only look good now in the spring when everything's erupting, but they'll look good later in the year too. Well, you should have been here 3 weeks ago when this whole plant was completely covered in crimson red shoots, really quite spectacular. Even now it's pretty good with the tips still showing that colour. And this is a form of the Norway Spruce, and just look at that cone in the centre. So from red shoots to red cones. Now this is really pretty spectacular, but most conifers don't have cones until they get much older. This is already 25 years old, so it's a real slow growing dwarf. And just look at those cones. Not only are they cones, but they're red. That's the female, of course, the cone, and you can see a few of last year's cones still hanging on the bush at the end of the stems. And the bright green shoots, really quite a transformation this time of year. I doubt many people know actually that conifers flower, or many conifers flower in fact, and some of them are quite showy. How about this? This is a pine that's probably about 30 years old, and it's gold in the winter, but at this time of the year on an older plant you get all these little flowers on these. These are the male flowers, and that's quite a showy change as the new little needles start to appear for the next year. This is a pine called Phrygian Gold from northern Germany, but it illustrates, it has golden foliage the year round, these needles which you talk about with pines, the male flowers which are beige, and then on this side you can see the female flowers, which of course are bright crimson here, following down the new shoot, and you've got one of last year's cones here too. This is in my trial area, and this is one Pinus parviflora, a Japanese pine I just had to have. It's got these nice, very fine needles which are tinged cream or golden, and it's called Goldilocks, and here are the new shoots which are also golden, deep golden, and it really is in spring quite transformational, and this can be kept relatively small. The noble fir is one of the most attractive but a very big tree. It's called an Abies procera, but one or two selections of it do have flowers and cones when they're much younger. This particular form here, you can see it's in flower now, and it's always at this time of the year quite spectacular with these red crimson male flowers. They eventually go beige and then the pollen spreads. Cones you occasionally will get on this tree, but it's a wonderful foliage plant the year round. This is Picea Oriental Skylands, eventually gets a big tree, but you can see at the moment it's making new growth with the golden tips, and it also has a lot of red flowers at this time of the year, followed by good bunches of cones. Now, small conifers can look a bit ridiculous planted next to big ones in the garden, but we call this the Conifer bed. It's not just conifers, but here I'm trialling some narrow upright forms, and some of them look quite attractive. I've got the labels on them so I make sure and remember the names, and then these might be moved into another part of the garden later. Now this is a conifer I really do take to. In fact, this is about the same age, maybe 4 or 5 years old. It's got a really lacy foliage. It's bright gold at this time of the year, tones down a bit later in the year and becomes bronze through the winter time. It's got this lacy foliage, as I say. It's the Chamaecyparis obtusa with these bronze stems as well, and I think that's really going to have a place in the garden. We can keep it pruned and keep it in reasonable shape, but I've got room for that. Well, we've just had a brief look around at some of the interesting aspects of conifers and a few newer ones that I'm sort of excited about in the garden, much to look forward to. So if you want to look a bit further and into other seasons, of course, when conifers have their attraction, then look at the book for reference and come back and view us in chapters 2, 3 and 4.